Hello and welcome back to another Millennial Minute. I'm David Grasso. Today's topic, should we get monthly stimulus payments? You've already heard from our guests. They're friends of mine and friends of Bold, Ajay Bruno and Max Burns. You can probably guess who's liberal and conservative. So let's get right into it, guys. It seems like you both agree with each other to an extent that some sort of stimulus is needed. Where we disagree is how we target it. So, AJ, what do you think the problem is with just blanket stimulus or stimuli, I guess, for that matter?
Well, I don't know where Max would get his information about how that would help. If you're just giving everyone a certain amount of money all the time, consistently, how do we, determine that criteria? Who gets it? How much do they get? How do we know it's impacting the economy? To just say a one size fits all approach or to just throw money at a problem, I think we need to approach this from a mathematical perspective. So far we've had trillions of dollars thrown in, and a lot of it probably has been wasted, frankly, and it hasn't helped people. So instead of wasting taxpayer dollars, get it back to the people who need it, get it back in ways which boost the economy. But we can't just say we're throwing all this money at something. We're having people who aren't even reading these bills, which are insanely, long. So we need people who are actually reading what they're proposing, and we need actual sound economics behind anything we're doing.
So Max, we know people are in pain and we're not going to sit here and say that people don't need help, but how do we make sure that the people who actually need help are getting the money and help that they need?
That's a great question. And accountability structures are so key here. One of the key complaints with things like the Paycheck Protection Program among Democrats was that there was simply no accountability structure, and it turned into a slush fund for corporations and fraud. But we've seen that this can be done well with proper accountability. I look at Professor Robert McNabb. He's an economist at Old Dominion University in Virginia. He conducted a full study of what every country has done to respond to the economic crisis of COVID. And he found that countries that increased their monthly stimulus payments had poverty growth rates that were smaller than the United States. The amount of homelessness was not rising as quickly as the United States, and self-reported levels of financial stress were lower than the United States. But this only comes if we have the political will to actually put in an accountability structure to make sure that money gets to the individuals and households that need it.
So one of my concerns, AJ, is I agree with everything Max is saying, but if you haven't noticed the math of our national budget, and even during the Trump administration, the federal government has a debt problem. And $1.9 trillion, it seems like numbers have lost their meaning in today's world. It's just like, it's like I'm going to the store and buying a pack of gum. $1.9 trillion is more than the GDP of virtually every country on earth except a handful that are rich or large in population. So do you think people understand how big these corona packages are that the Biden administration is promoting and that the Trump administration proposed and got through last year?
Well, David, the federal debt is one of the things that really makes me sick in this country. In 2009, we had 10 point something trillion dollars in debt. With this new relief bill, I think we're pushing 30 trillion now. I mean, these are the people we have in power, again, on both sides of the aisle, who have tripled our debt in a little over a decade. That's outrageous. We're never going to get out of it. So I think it's kind of lost the meaning to regular people. I mean, what's a few trillion here and there? What's a few hundred billion there? We're just adding on debt, and it's going to keep compounding. A lot of that debt we owe to China. Very ironic. So I don't think people really think about it that much. And, whether it's the Biden administration proposing this or whatnot, $1.9 trillion. How much of this money is going to get into the hands of real Americans or small businesses that need it? How much of it is just waste? Again, this bill is, I think it's like thousands of pages long. How many of the people voting for it actually read the entire thing? So these are the problems we have. We keep repeating the same mistakes again and again. And I think it's just sad for the country as a whole. And I wish more people would actually know and care.
I guess, Max, my question is there's a bit of hypocrisy among conservatives, right? Because they all seem to be concerned with the national debt when they're not in power. But when Trump was in power, we ran trillion-dollar deficits, and that was totally fine. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the Biden coronavirus plan, it roughly equates to the sum total of President Trump's corporate tax cuts across 4 years. This was a time when no conservatives were talking about how much money that was, how little accountability there was for it. You didn't hear a peep of people saying, let's make sure this tax cut money goes to tax-paying American corporations and not offshore operations. This is something that the American people see, and quite simply, they don't take it seriously anymore. They see a Republican Party and a Washington more than happy to spend money when it's on donors and big corporations. But when it's families in need, suddenly the ledger book comes out and we start counting pennies. And that's just one of the reasons that Washington has lost so much faith among voters.
I think Max is right, and I don't think you'll actually disagree, AJ, will you?
No, that's true. But I do think he kind of has a bit of a partisan bent to it. Again, I'm a Reagan conservative. I condemn Republicans and Democrats alike. They've both been part of the problem for years, and we got to get this under control. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. It should be an issue of patriotism, of basic math. And frankly, there's not many people in government who can do that, which is concerning for all of us.
Yeah. Max, what do we do about this, right? We have a spending problem, but we have a lot of people in need. Is this not the right time to address the concerns around our national debt and just get help to those who are in need and put politics aside?
I think we've never seen a country austerity itself out of a recession like this, out of an instability like we're seeing right now. This is a time to take action and help actual people who are fighting homelessness, who are choosing between putting food on the table or getting medicine in some cases. This is not a hypothetical spending issue. This has the opportunity to positively or negatively impact millions of lives, depending on how we act right now.
But I want to play devil's advocate, and this will be my last question for you, AJ. It seems like Democrats constantly use these crises to grow the size of the government. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they do that. It's an historical problem that's only grown worse over time. You can go back to something like the New Deal, which I guess helped get us out of the recession, the depression at the time. But nowadays, I don't know what their agenda is, but it's not a good one. We don't need a bigger government. Bigger government is generally bad for Americans. We need a smaller government, one that protects the rights of citizens but doesn't infringe on them. And do I trust far left Democrats, which is what we have these days, to actually not infringe on our rights? No, not as far as I can throw them, and it's not a good thing.
And to throw a bone at Max, the government did not shrink under the Trump administration, so conservatives are equally hypocritical about growing government. And I'll give you the last word, Max.
Absolutely. And the question is, who are we growing government for? If we're going to spend large amounts of money, we need to know that it's going to help people who are most in need. Otherwise, we're just creating more and more sentiment that the government doesn't work for people. And we can do so much better than that.
Well, like the spirit of the show, I agree with a lot of what you both said, and that's what the show is all about. So on that note, AJ and Max, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on the Millennial Minute. Be sure to follow us at Bold TV on the social media platform of your choice. And on that note, have a great day.